Hi guys, and welcome to round 3 of Indie April. Today I'm going to be talking about the last book in my backlist, the dreaded backlist, Georgie. Now I'm actually currently battling to be heard over my neighbours who have got a bit of a buzzsaw festival going on today. It's a bit like living in the waiting room of a dentist, but hopefully I can reduce that in the edit. So I'm going to press ahead. Georgie! Okay, so Lusig was a horror story, Angarichna was historical fiction, and Georgie was my attempt to write a romance. I am not a big romance reader. I have to admit that. I think a lot of people who grow up as like horror junkies don't often tend towards the romance side of it. However, one of my favourite books is actually a romance. It's called Chloe by Freya North, and I think that's the only romance book that I ever just went, oh, this is amazing. You know, it's a really intelligent sort of travel-based romance story about a girl kind of figuring out her place in the world and meeting lots of interesting people along the way. So, yeah, I like that book. Anyway, I don't know why I wrote this. I was going through one of those phases of, I wonder if I could write in this style. Now, it's not a pastiche, but it's an attempt at a romance, a sort of a comedic romance, but it's dark in places because that is my natural tendency, and no matter how hard I try just to write a purely uplifting book, there's always going to be something in there that kind of is not so bright and happy. But anyway, what's Georgie about? Well, and how did it come into being, more interestingly? It is very in a very similar vein to what I talked about in Angarichna. Georgie is a book written around a character that just appeared one day. So I'd recently got back to the UK from Rwanda, and I was staying with my dad at the time in Gloucester, and I was walking across Gloucester Park to go to town. It was a bit of an overcast day, a little bit blustery, and all of a sudden I felt like I wasn't entirely walking alone, and I kind of felt like there was this, fully formed character next to me. And the character was so smartly dressed. I've got to say, I'm a bit of a sucker for a trilby and a tie. I think that should probably be the national dress of every country, just trilby and tie. I like that. I like that look. I can't carry it off myself terribly well, but I like that look. And this character was dressed incredibly smartly, and I knew there was something a little bit special going on there. So Georgie is the story of a straight girl called Phoebe, going about her rather mundane life, working in a charity and kind of working in the office and shifting a lot of paperwork on the day-to-day, gets dumped in horrific fashion by her slightly drug-addled ex-boyfriend Mark, and ends up falling for a very suave, very sophisticated looking, who she assumes to be a bloke, who isn't a bloke, who is Georgie, hence the, a very androgynous name. Georgie, could be male, could be female. And Georgie is a trans guy, and he absolutely sweeps her off her feet. So for me, this book was a sort of a romance against the odds kind of book, in the way that all really good romances are. Boy meets girl, girl meets boy, whatever, okay, fine, off they go. But if you put something in there where the characters are from totally different backgrounds and totally different world experiences, that's where the entertainment comes in, is how do people navigate really big issues sometimes. So when I was living in Cardiff years ago, I used to spend time on Charles Street. Now, Charles Street was I'm saying was in the past tense. I assume it's still there. I don't know. I haven't been to Wales in a very, very long time. But Charles Street was this street which was just LGBTQ heaven. There were bars on both sides and you could just spend the night going in and out of different bars. And everybody loved Charles Street. So straight people loved Charles Street because the music was always better there. You know, you go and have a really great time, nice atmosphere. Whereas LGBT friends from Charles Street didn't always enjoy the straight scene quite as much because, you know, it's a little bit more subdued. So for me, it was always very interesting to see that crossover of sort of, I'm going to say culture because it is a different culture. And I think if you're not too sure what I mean by that, this book kind of brings it out a bit more. So we've got Phoebe, who's never been on the scene before. And you've got George, who's pretty much grown up on it through the, through the community. And it's how their friends, how their families, and how they themselves navigate this new territory on both sides. So, you know, I think it's an interesting story because one thing George, the main character, George Macaulay, is sort of sophistication on legs, very self-confident, and, you know, has a really good life to all intents and purposes. Sorry, something just fell on the roof. But he's also battling a lot of loss and a lot of regret over something that happened in his past that he's never really talked about. So on the other hand, Phoebe comes across as a bit scatterbrained, you know, a little bit, just sort of going through life, da-di-da-di-da, but has actually got her shit together pretty well by the end of it. And it's kind of a nice crossover of two sort of souls helping each other through life. And in the background, I brought in a couple of other characters. So Phoebe's best friend, Orla, who seems like a really good friend to begin with, but as time goes by, you sort of see a slightly ugly side of her character coming through. She has a lot of problems accepting that Phoebe is entering into the LGBT community and making new friends, and you know that sort of side comes out in her. And I think, you know, there are people in the world who really do struggle to just be accepting and to take people at face value. So, you know, she sort of brings a little bit of homophobia to the table, and we have to deal with that. And on the opposite side, we've got Sebastian, and Sebastian is George's best mate, and Sebastian is a guy who, you know, he didn't have an easy coming out story. He had a lot to deal with, a lot of prejudice, a lot of rejection from his family, and he has gone the other way. So he's quite nasty towards Phoebe. He's quite suspicious of straight people coming into the gay community. So you've got both sides there, and both of them expressing their fears and their concerns. And then you've got other characters in there who are supportive and who are helpful. And it's just, I enjoyed this book. I enjoyed writing this book just because it's a very modern story. It's a modern day story, whereas I'd just come straight out of a historical fiction story. And I think it navigates a lot of social sort of stigma, a lot of social sort of maze work that you can see the cogs ticking in people's brains as they go through it. And I love the character of Georgie. I just thought, ooh, because it all began with Georgie. I was walking across the field, and there was this fully formed character basically saying, "Write me." And so I did. Now, of all my books, it is possibly the least polished, and I will edit and re-release this at some point. It was me having fun with myself, me doing a little bit of just playful imagining. And I really did enjoy it, and I can see how romance writing could become a bit addictive, because it really is about interpersonal relationships and overcoming sort of relationship obstacles. And it was quite fascinating to write, I felt. And yeah, so there was that. And I think really just the thing about this book that is the memorable part to me is it landed me at my first ever book festival. By a bit of accident, really. So I can't remember if I was promoting this book or one of the other two, but it's quite normal as an author to go on a blog tour, which is there are people who write blogs around the world reviewing books and talking about books. And if you've got a book coming out, it's quite usual to go on a tour of these blogs and to sort of do a question and answers, or to talk about the inspiration behind the book, or to just tell people what the book's about and do an excerpt. It's kind of that kind of thing. And I landed on a blog called Morgan, with an E, Morgan Bailey. And she was really supportive, really lovely, did a couple of spotlights on her blog. And it turned out that she is actually from Northamptonshire. And I'm from a little village in Northamptonshire as well. We basically really got chatting, and a little while later she said, well, look, we've got the first ever LGBTQ book festival going on in Northampton. Do you want to be a part of it? And I was like, yeah, love to be a part of it. And it was just, oh my God, it was fantastic. I have so many friends today that I met at that book festival. It was just the best group of people. I took part in a female author discussion panel with other authors, V.G. Lee, Sophia Blackwell and Jane Reynolds. And that was just brilliant. It was hosted by Morgan. She was asking the questions. We just had so much fun. And there were a lot of Doctor Who writers there as well. So Gary Russell was there, Joe Lidster, and Paul Mars and his lovely husband Jeremy. And I also got to meet art critic Panda. My travelling bunny, Percy, named after my granddad, he got to meet art critic Panda, and art critic Panda has currently got a really irreverent book of his own out at the moment. So yeah, you can go and check that out, but maybe don't show your mother. So that was incredible. I also met Claire Summerskill, who is just talent on legs, and she had written a book called Gateway to Heaven, which was all about the history of lesbian and gay culture in London at the time, and that is a brilliant book. Definitely check that book out. Who else? Oh, the lovely guys who were running it, Dan and Colin was chaperoning me around, and we ended up going to watch Jane Lovering. So Jane is a romance author, and she was promoting her book Vampire State of Mind, which is awesome. And it was quite a quiet reading. There were not that many people there. It was the same when I did a signing at Waterstones down the road, and you could see the tumbleweed going past. It was one of those trials that authors go through where you turn up, you're ready, you're on your game, and like, whew, there's nobody there. But Jane, she was brilliant. She gave the reading, absolutely excellent. The book is excellent. And then she went on to win the Romance Novel of the Year award in the UK, and I think she's done it a couple of times since. I think she also won it this year as well. So she done good. So it was really wonderful to sort of see her giving sort of first reading, and then to see how her career has just gone whoomph. That was brilliant. Crime writer Adrian Magson as well was brilliant. He was there, and I think Adrian is from Northamptonshire as well, which is I think why he was there. But he was just brilliant, and his books have just come one after the other after the other after the other. I'll put a link to everybody's websites below. They're fantastic. But through meeting him, he did me an incredible solid, and I got into Writing Magazine. I had a little Q&A in there thanks to Adrian, and his interview on my blog. I did an interview with him about crime writing ages ago, and that is by far the most read post on my entire blog, which is really, really nice. Oh, another guy who was there who has remained a good friend is Will Davis. So he won the Betty Trask Award in 2007 for his novel My Side of the Story. Will is just this incredible acrobat. He's an aerialist and he teaches aerialism. I don't know how you say that, aerialism. But what I love about him is, you know, a bit like me, he likes to play with genre, or he used to play with genre a lot. And in My Side of the Story, it's kind of a jaunty, easy to read romp through this chaotic kid's life as he's kind of discovering his sexuality. And then he was there promoting his other book, The Aerialist, which is just glorious literary fiction. I love the cover. I love the writing. The way it's written is just gorgeous. Again, I'll put all the links below if you want to go and read that. So there were so many things that I learned at this book festival. I was really, really honoured to have been invited. I was giving, I think it was my first public reading, and it was from Georgie. And I was standing there at my little lectern and I was reading, and I got distracted. So I was partway through a sentence, and there are some funny moments in here. Every now and again there's a line. And one of the people listening laughed. And because they laughed, I laughed and glanced up. And of course I totally lost my place in the book, and there was this horrific, all-consuming silence as I sweated and tried to remember where the hell I was. So I learnt from that two things if you're giving a public reading, because I was never too sure when you give a public reading if you're supposed to just look at the book, or if you're supposed to look up and make eye contact with people, or how that's supposed to work. I think everybody's a little bit different, and I think it really depends how well you memorize your lines. But for me, I realized that firstly, just ignore everybody, really focus on the book and just read what's on the page, keep your eyes on the page. And secondly, follow it with your finger so that if you happen to look up or get distracted, when you look back down, you can see exactly where you were again. I got better at readings after that very quickly. But that was nice. I think it was just one of those awkward moments, because then the person who laughed felt awkward because I missed my place, and I felt awkward because I didn't want them to feel awkward. And anyway. And the other thing that I learned from this is that I need to keep my mouth shut when I meet celebrities, because I'm not good at that. I say silly things. So the guest of honour at the book festival was Alan Moore. So Watchmen, V for Vendetta. And I didn't realise, but he's also from Northamptonshire. And that's why he came along as well. I disgraced myself. Basically, I was standing there, Colin was greeting him, and I was just standing next to him. And whilst Colin was, saying welcome, I was my eyes just drifted down to the floor, because he was wearing the most incredible purple sparkly winkle pickers I've ever seen in my life. I kind of drifted back into the conversation as Alan was explaining that he wasn't going to give any autographs. He didn't want to do any autographs. And I couldn't help myself. I just said, I don't want your autograph. I want your shoes. And I don't think he was very amused by that. He kind of sort of looked at me and then sort of walked off. But yeah, no, I still want those shoes. But he gave a show-stopping rendition of The Mirror of Love, which is a poem. And it's beautiful. And he read it beautifully. And it was one of those moments where he stopped and the room was silent. It was just beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Again, I'll put the link below. It was partly the beauty of the poetry, and partly his reading of it was just so sincere, so good. So I really enjoyed. It was a brilliant, brilliant book festival, and I got there because of this book. Just to explain the cover a little bit, it was published by Green Sunset again, who published Angarichna. I was expecting the logo to be in the centre of the book, but it was to the left, so I don't know. I'd love to put another cover on it. I'd like to do a lucid makeover on it and just sort of zhuzh it a little bit. But also, word to the wise, never get a white cover for your book, because you can probably see this, but it does not stay white for long. It gets really, really manky really, really quickly. So it looks good for a moment on the shelf, but white book covers don't do it. Not unless they've got a dust cover around them. So anyway, that is my fun romance, and that brings us to the end of my my backlist books. So there are 3 backlists, so let me just recap that quickly. Lucid was the first book I ever wrote and the 3rd one to be published. Angarechna was the 2nd book I ever wrote and the 1st one to be published, and this was the 3rd book I ever wrote and the 2nd one to be published by a very short margin, because this basically came out a couple of days before Netherworld published Lucid, so they both came out pretty much at the same time. Anyway, so those are my backlist books. I'm not ashamed of them. I don't tend to promote them, just because they are early works and they were me trying to figure out if I could write, how to write, what to write about, and that's why they're all so different. So horror, historical fiction, romance, it's all a bit contemporary romance, it's all a bit woo. So after today we're going to get on to the serious books, the books that I would say are solid. So if you are a writer, tell me about your first ever experience at a book festival, if you've been to one, or of giving a public reading. If you're a reader, what do you like when you go to see an author at a book festival or giving a reading? What do you like to see in them, or the way that they deliver what they're writing? Who's the best author you've ever seen giving a reading? So, all right. Happy Indie April.